Prologue, the signal. At exactly 3:42 Coordinated Universal Time, a signal pierced the silence of space. It wasn't loud, it wasn't clear, but it was unmistakably artificial. A distress call, picked up by the Sigma-9 Deep Space Monitoring Array, orbiting a dwarf planet at the edge of the Helios frontier. The signal repeated itself every 23 seconds, low frequency, badly degraded and laced with static. Yet beneath the noise, analysts detected an ancient identification code embedded deep within the carrier wave. It belonged to a vessel presumed destroyed 26 years ago. The last known coordinates placed it near the expansive region of space feared and avoided by most navigational routes due to electromagnetic interference, gravitational anomalies, and dozens of unexplainable malfunctions reported by passing ships. The place had earned a name among pilots, the Dead Zone. No signal had ever escaped that area. No ship that entered returned. Until now, the Aletheia had vanished during a classified deep space reconnaissance mission. The final report from Mission Control was brief. Contact lost. No recovery possible. All hands presumed dead. No wreckage, no survivors, and no hint of what had happened to the crew of 17 aboard. Now, after over 2 decades, a whisper had returned from the void. Dr. Alina Marlowe, lead signal analyst at Sigma-9, was the first to realize what she was hearing. The moment she enhanced the playback, chills crawled down her spine. Not from the message itself, but from what lay underneath it. Behind the garbled distress code were voices, not one, many, layered together, talking over one another, speaking in different tones, speeds, and sometimes languages. Some pleaded, some screamed, others simply laughed. It wasn't a message meant to be understood. It was a warning, or a trap. Security protocols locked the transmission behind several layers of clearance. But the rumors spread fast through science stations, trade ships, covert military channels. The ghost of the Aletheia was calling home, and no one could explain how or why. The Galactic Council issued a statement. We are investigating a historical signal artifact. There is no cause for concern. But those who listened closely knew better. This wasn't just a ship reaching out. It was something else. Something that had survived in the dark for 26 years. Or something that had taken its place. A special mission was formed under the codename Vigilant Dawn, a crew of scientists, engineers, and Black Ops operatives. Their objective, to investigate the signal and, if possible, recover the Aletheia. No one questioned the danger, but there was one thing no one expected. When they found the Aletheia, it was perfectly intact. Lights off. Systems offline. Engines cold. But its airlock was open. And the signal, it was still transmitting. Chapter 1, The Approach. The Vigilant Dawn emerged from hyperspace in silence. No fanfare, no celebration. Only the hum of stabilized thrusters and the steady ping of long-range scanners filling the cockpit. Commander Elias Monroe stood at the forward viewport, arms crossed behind his back, eyes narrowed at the growing silhouette ahead. It loomed like a coffin adrift in a sea of black. Glacier, lifeless hulk, drifting without power, yet intact, untouched by time or decay. The elite. There she is, whispered Lieutenant Aria Chen, the mission's communications officer. Her voice cracked slightly through the comms link, just like the scans said, dead in the water. but even the word dead felt insufficient. The ship ahead didn't just seem lifeless, it radiated absence, as if it had been scrubbed clean of the chaos of life. No blinking lights, no pulse from her core reactor, not even passive reflections from her hull plating, just a black shape, perfectly still, in a region of space where nothing should transmit and nothing should return. The vigilant dawn slowly adjusted its trajectory, approaching along the Aletheia's dorsal axis. Proximity warnings chirped as docking clamps prepared to engage. "Gravity's low," said Dr. Harlan Pierce, the ship's lead astrophysicist, eyes glued to his sensor readouts. "No EM interference now, but the whole region is quiet, too quiet." "Define quiet," Monroe replied, eyes still fixed ahead. "No stellar radiation, no neutrino bleed, no background cosmic noise. It's like this space is insulated, like the universe doesn't even know we're here." That was a comforting thought. Inside the cargo bay, the away team prepared in silence. 5 members, each handpicked for the mission. Commander Monroe, team leader and former deep space tactician. Lieutenant Aria Chen, expert in xenolinguistics and encryption. Dr. Pierce, astrophysicist and anomaly specialist. Sergeant Reyes, ex-Marine and security lead. And finally, Dr. Leela Voss, senior biologist, though no one expected to find anything alive. The boarding suits were reinforced, designed for high radiation, exposure, and unknown biological agents. Helmets sealed with a hiss. Lights flicked on. Heart rate spiked. The airlock cycled as the tunnel extended and locked onto the Aletheia starboard hatch. Monroe felt it a pressure in his chest that had nothing to do with atmosphere. Something primal, ancient, a quiet instinct whispering, "Don't go in there." He stepped through anyway. The airlock opened with a groan, not from power, but from residual pressure still functioning after all these years. Emergency lights flickered weakly in the corridor beyond, casting red strobes along the walls like a heartbeat. The floor was covered in a fine layer of dust, though there was no gravity source to settle it. And the temperature was cold, much colder than the scans predicted. They moved in slow formation, flashlights scanning the passage ahead. "No signs of hull breach," Reyes reported, eyes sweeping for threats. "Structures stable, but the internal layouts off." Dr. Voss nodded slowly. "Some corridors are longer than they should be. These sections were only supposed to span 12 meters. This one's at least 20. Maybe an illusion," Pierce offered. "Gravitational distortion can warp depth perception." But Monroe had served too many years on ships to mistake illusion for unease. The air felt thick, even in the suits. The silence pressed against them like weight. At the end of the corridor, the doors to the command bridge stood open. Monroe hesitated, then stepped inside. The bridge was intact. Chairs neatly in place. Consoles powered down. No signs of damage, no blood, no struggle. Just to stand the unmistakable impression that someone had been here recently. A coffee mug floated in the air, half full. Lieutenant Chen drifted to the nearest terminal and tried to power it on. Nothing. "Mainframe's offline," she said. "Battery back up too. But there's something else." She reached toward the pilot's chair. Resting on the console was a data. The screen was cracked, but still held a faint glow. Pierce activated his scanner. "It's a recording." Chen tapped in a code. The pad vibrated slightly, then played back a voice weak, distorted, almost swallowed by static. This is Captain Reza of the Aletheia. If you're hearing this, we didn't make it. We found something. We brought it aboard. It wasn't alive. At least not like we understand life. It listens. It waits. It changes you. The message degraded further, breaking into garbled tones and an eerie, rhythmic clicking sound almost like breathing. "Where's the crew?" Voss asked, barely a whisper. No one answered, because that was the real question. There should have been 17 people aboard, dead or alive, but the ship was empty. Not a single body, no traces, no DNA, nothing. Chen's scanner beeped softly. "I've got a life sign," she said. Everyone turned. "What?" Monroe barked. "Faint, moving, from the lower decks." "Could be a glitch," Reyes offered. "Or not," Voss replied grimly. Monroe exhaled, the inside of his visor fogging slightly. He'd faced pirates, rogue AI colonies, and even orbital collapse, but this felt different. Ancient, wrong. "All right," he said. "We move toward engineering. Stay sharp. No one wanders. No one splits off." As the team turned to exit the bridge, the lights flickered. Not in the vigilant dawn, not in their suits, but on the Aletheia. For just a moment, the corridor ahead glowed faintly, as if the ship itself had exhaled, and somewhere in the walls, a soft hum began to rise. Chapter 2: Echoes in the Dark. The sound started as a low hum, barely audible at first, almost like a resonance buried beneath the structure itself. The Aletheia was remembering something, or trying to. It pulsed in waves as the away team moved deeper, descending into the lower decks. The walls here were tighter, lined with cold conduits and frost-covered control panels. The team's flashlights swept across the metallic ribs of the corridor, casting shadows that danced and twisted behind them. "There's no reason for the lights to come on," muttered Pierce, his eyes flicking to the bulkheads. "Power's been dead for decades. There's no active core." "Then what's humming?" Voss asked. No one answered. Lieutenant Chen followed the life sign tracker. Her hands trembled slightly, though she kept moving. The signal was erratic, appearing, vanishing, then reappearing several meters away, as if whatever it was moved through the walls. "Reading just spiked again," she said. "Deck 6, Biolab section." Monroe frowned. The Aletheia didn't have a bio. It does now. The hallway turned sharply, and there it was. A door labeled subsection 6B. Scorched at the edges, paint warped by heat. A warning symbol blinked red above the hatch, barely functioning. "Hazard Class 7. Biological containment breach." Chen glanced at Monroe. He nodded. Reyes stepped forward and cracked the door manually, pushing it open with a hiss of stale air and silence. The room beyond was wrong. Not just old, not just damaged, but altered. The walls were covered in a slick, organic residue, dark grey with hints of violet. Pulsing faintly as if breathing, tubes snaked across the ceiling, not part of the original design. Broken lab equipment lay scattered across the floor. Overturned tables, shattered glass. But most disturbing were the containment pods lining the walls. 7 in total. 6 were shattered from the inside. The 7th was empty, clean, and sealed tight. A low, rhythmic tapping echoed from within it. Tap, tap, tap. Then silence. Chen's scanner shrieked with interference. spiking to max for half a second, then flatlined. "I lost the signal," she said. "No," whispered Voss, stepping toward the far wall. "You didn't. It just moved." She pointed her flashlight at the floor. Footprints. Fresh. They weren't human. 3 toes. Elongated. Clawed. Spaced oddly, like the creature walked on its toes rather than its soles. The prints led to a maintenance hatch at the rear of the lab, partially ajar. Reyes raised his rifle. "We're not alone." The humming intensified. Then the whispering began. Soft at first, then rising in intensity-layered voices. Overlapping languages, some speaking backward, others with no identifiable structure. It poured in through their helmet coms, bypassing encryption like it had always been there. Let it in, let it become. We were never meant to leave. Your names unknown, your faces remembered. Come, see. What we found. Dr. Pierce fell to his knees. I can hear them. There, in my head. Monroe grabbed him, forced him to focus. "Stay with me, Doctor." The voices stopped, suddenly, and just like that, the humming vanished. Silence reclaimed the ship. Then, a loud crash echoed from somewhere deep below them, metal on metal. A heavy door slamming shut. Monroe made a decision. We're pulling back now. But the signal Chen started. "We'll regroup. Review footage. This isn't an exploration anymore. This is a recovery op. And I'm not losing anyone in this floating graveyard." They turned to leave. That's when the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the team. Suit lights flickered, then failed. Comms fizzled. Monroe's voice echoed through static. "Form up. Stay close." But no one could see. No one could hear. Then, a scream. It wasn't from the crew. It came from somewhere else. Low, guttural, layered with multiple pitches. A sound no human throat could produce. It echoed through the hull like a memory, shaking dust from the ceiling, vibrating through the bones of the ship. Voss reached blindly for Chun's shoulder. She grabbed air. Seconds passed, or maybe minutes. Then, with a pop, the lights returned. All 5 suits reconnected. Heart rate spiked. But Monroe's count was wrong. There were only 4 of them. Chen was gone. Her tracker still blinked, moving. Down, straight into the engine room. Son of Reyes growled, already heading for the hatch. "Wait," Monroe barked. "We follow protocol." "Protocol?" "She's alone down there with whatever the hell that thing is." Monroe clenched his jaw, but nodded. "We move, quiet. Guns hot. No one else vanishes." They descended into the bowels of the Aletheia, where the air felt thicker, where the gravity shouldn't shift, but did. Lights flickered in and out, revealing brief glimpses of strange markings burned into the wall spiral. Diagrams, shapes that seemed to squirm when stared at too long. Voss muttered to herself. "This isn't just biology. It's mimetic. Cognitive infection. This place wants us to see." "See what?" Pierce asked. But no one answered, because when they reached the engine room, Chen was standing in the center, smiling, alone. Her suit was open, her helmet discarded, and yet she was breathing calm still, unbothered by the zero atmosphere conditions. Her eyes were pitch black. She spoke, but her voice was not her own. "We brought it here. We made a mistake. Now it knows your names. Now you belong to the Aletheia. And behind her, something moved in the dark. Chapter 3. The Captain's Log. The bridge was dead. Lights dimmed, dust drifting through weightless silence like ancient ash in a cathedral. Consoles blinked, weakly, some still responding, others frozen mid-function, trapped in a loop that had played out decades ago. Reyes stepped forward first. No bodies, he muttered. Not even suits. Monroe floated behind him, scanning slowly. That's not possible. Command logs show a full crew complement when Aletheia vanished. Then where the hell are they? Reyes whispered. No one answered, not until the console lit up. It wasn't supposed to. The main terminal had no external power, no viable uplink, but now it pulsed. A slow, red heartbeat. Then came the voice. Primary bridge node active. Captain Reza Farouk. Final entry. Dated October 13th, 2197. The message began to play. The audio was garbled, degraded by time and stress. Static broke across the voice like waves on an empty shore, but Reza's voice cut through it all. Tired, broken, human. This is Captain Reza Farouk. If anyone's hearing this, we were wrong. It started with the signal. We shouldn't have followed it. We thought it was a distress call. It wasn't. It was bait. The room seemed to contract. No one breathed. We found something. In the drift. Not a ship. Not a planet. Just a shape. A structure. Floating. Unmoving. Waiting. It doesn't move. It doesn't breathe. But it's inside our thoughts. One by one, they changed. At first, just odd behavior. Whispering, dreaming. But then, a pause. Dr. Sharma opened the airlock, smiling, said she was going to join the choir. She just stepped into space. Then Thorny stopped recognizing his own name, said he was never born, that he was a dream someone forgot to end. Now I'm the last. I've sealed myself in the bridge. Whatever this is, it's learning. It doesn't just infect minds. It becomes them. I think it's inside me now. God help us all. The message cut off. Silence returned. But it wasn't empty. It was watching. Monroe was the first to speak. He knew, right to the end. Pierce whispered, "It's not a virus. It's an idea." Reyes frowned. "What are you saying?" Pierce turned slowly, eyes haunted. "It's mimetic, like a thought that rewrites you the moment you think it." Monroe looked back at the console. Then we just heard it. Everyone froze. Reyes exhaled. "You think listening to the log might have infected us?" "I don't know." Pierce's voice cracked. "But Captain Reza said it's in his mind. If this thing is non-biological, if it lives in cognition, then hearing his words might have just opened the door." The screen flashed again. Another message? No, the same message. Playing again, on loop. "This is Captain Reza Farouk. If anyone's hearing this..." Reyes shut it off. Silence. Monroe checked his readings. Hulls still stable. Atmosphere intact. But I'm registering M-flux in the neural comms array. Reyes turned. "That's supposed to be shielded." It was. They moved to the captain's chair. Pierce crouched beside the black box unit, running scans. "This tech's outdated, but I can extract more data. Last 48 hours before shutdown." He tapped a few keys. Dozens of logs. Visual feed. Reza screaming at an empty room. Voice notes, repeating the same sentence over and over. Security logs. Doors opening without crew input. Crew members vanishing from the ship's records, not deleted, just erased. A schematic of the brain with notations in a language none of them recognized. God, Pierce murmured. He documented the change in real time. Reyes leaned in. What was he trying to say? Pierce stared at one line in Reza's final written log. It doesn't want our bodies. It wants our blueprints. Monroe whispered, You think it's copying us? No, Pierce said, slowly. I think it's overwriting us. A distant thump echoed through the hull. All three froze. A hiss. Then movement far down the corridor. Something scraping, metallic, deliberate. Reyes stood, rifle up. Pierce backed toward the exit. Whatever did this might still be here. No, Monroe said. It is here. He turned back to the console one last time. Typed a single line. Send all data to SIGMA9. The terminal beeped. Transmission initiated. If they didn't make it out, someone else had to know. And maybe it would be enough to keep this from spreading. Chapter 4. The Entity. The engineering bay had gone silent. No hum of fusion coils. No chatter of automated diagnostics. Only a low-frequency vibration like the breath of something vast and sleeping. Reyes led the way, weapon raised. Monroe and Pierce flanked behind him, flashlights sweeping the corridor. Power drains accelerating, Monroe muttered, staring at his wrist scanner. We'll be dark in 20 minutes. Reyes didn't respond. He was staring at the hatch ahead, the thick, reinforced doors to engineering. They were open, just slightly, enough to suggest something had gone in, or come out. Pierce stepped forward. Let's get this over with. The door hissed open. They stepped inside. What they saw wasn't in any manual. The center of the bay had become a cocoon of darkness. Floating above the reactor core was the size of a human torso, no light of its own, yet glowing with an impossible shadow. It bent space around it, like the black hole of a dying star. But worse, because it pulsed. It lived. Cables had been torn from panels, and were now attached directly to it, feeding energy into its form. The lights in the room flickered in time with its rhythm. Reyes whispered, "What the hell is that?" As if in response, the sphere shimmered and something emerged. Not a form, not a face. A presence. Each of them saw something different. For Reyes, it was his wife, dead 2 years now. Standing by the core, her smile exactly as he remembered, lips moving without sound. For Monroe, it was his brother, lost in a mining accident on Europa, bleeding from his eyes, whispering, "You left me." For Pierce, it was himself, but not quite. The reflection in the black sphere, moving a heartbeat out of sync, grinning. They staggered back. The hallucinations vanished, but the fear remained. It fed on that. Pierce fell to his knees, clutching his head. It's broadcasting. Thoughts, emotions, not just observing, manipulating. Monroe stumbled to the console. I can't shut it off. It's rerouted the entire grid. It's grown roots through the ship's nervous system. Reyes aimed his rifle at the sphere. Don't, Pierce said quickly. We don't know what physical damage would do. We might make it angrier. Reyes lowered the weapon, barely. The sphere pulsed again. A whisper echoed through the chamber. not through the air inside them. I see you. Each syllable slithered across their spines. You brought me thoughts. I hunger. Let me in. Monroe screamed and ripped off his helmet. There was no airlock between them and death, but his body remained intact, breathing. He looked around, dazed. It's making us forget what's real. Reyes grabbed him, forced the helmet back on. Focus. It hasn't taken us yet. We still have time. Pierce pulled up the last system diagnostics. No backup logs. No emergency override. But he looked up. There's a failed nuclear core vent protocol. We can eject the entire chamber into space. Reyes glanced at the sphere, still pulsing, still waiting. And if it follows us? Monroe asked. It's feeding off fear, Pierce replied. If we cut it off from that, if we isolate it in the vacuum, it might starve. Might, not will. The console flickered again. Words appeared on the screen, typed by no one. You do not understand. I was born in silence. You brought me voices. I was empty. You filled me. The lights dimmed. Panels sparked. The sphere began to unravel, threads of black light reaching across the room, crawling toward them. Reyes hit the override. Pierce. The venting sequence started now. Pierce scrambled to the controls. His fingers moved like lightning. Commands entered. Power rerouted. Warning lights flared red. Venting sequence initiated. Core chamber will eject in 60 seconds. The sphere screamed. Not sound. Emotion. It was afraid. It lashed out. A wave of thought, pure, invasive, all-consuming. Each of them staggered as memories shattered like glass. Reyes saw his own corpse floating in the void, eyes hollow. Monroe felt time loop, endlessly dying, waking, dying again. Pierce heard his mother's voice, telling him he never existed. But they held. Through clenched teeth, Reyes growled, "You're not real." 10 seconds. The sphere thrashed, cables snapping, lights exploding, the ship shaking. 5 seconds. Monroe screamed, "It's breaking through." 2 seconds. Pierce closed his eyes. Goodbye. The chamber ejected. Metal screamed against metal. A final pulse of darkness exploded outward. And then silence. True silence. The ship stabilized. Emergency lights returned. The darkness was gone, but none of them spoke. Because deep in the void outside, the black sphere floated, still pulsing, still watching. Chapter 5. No escape. The Aletheia should have been a graveyard, but as the minutes ticked by, it was becoming something far worse. Reyes stood by the command deck, his gaze fixed on the terminal. The dim glow of emergency lights painted the walls in eerie reds and blues, casting long shadows where no one had stood for decades. Monroe's voice cut through the stillness. "I've been trying to reboot the escape pod for hours. It's not responding. We're stuck here." Reyes' hands clenched around the controls. "Check again. Maybe a different relay." "I've tried every route," Monroe snapped, frustration rising in his voice. "Nothing?" Pierce stepped forward, his face ashen, haunted by the horrors they'd witnessed. "It's not the pod. It's the ship." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Outside the observation window, the void stretched endlessly, dark and cold. The stars outside blinked, indifferent to the suffering unfolding aboard Aletheia. "I'm telling you," Pierce continued. The ship's not just failing, it's actively preventing us from leaving. The engines, they won't ignite. The navigation's locked down. We can't even get the emergency systems to power up. Monroe let out a bitter laugh. Are we supposed to just sit here and wait to die, then? Reyes turned to him sharply. We're not giving up yet. There's got to be a way. But deep down, Reyes could feel the weight of inevitability pressing against him. Something was stopping them. Something far worse than a mechanical failure. Something alive. The voice came softly at first, just a whisper. Faint, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder. It was like a murmuring that came from deep inside their own minds. Reyes. He spun around. There was no one behind him. Monroe. The voice echoed in Monroe's ears. His face twisted in confusion. Did you hear that? Monroe. Pierce called, his tone tight with unease. Who are you talking to? I swear I heard it, Monroe said, his voice trembling. It was someone called my name. Pierce frowned. It's not real. It's the thing in the ship manipulating your mind. It's trying to break you down. Reyes clenched his fists. It's getting to us. We need to stick together. But the whispers didn't stop. The hours dragged on. Each of them locked in their own war with the thing that had invaded their minds. A constant presence. A force that seemed to grow stronger as the minutes passed. And then, it started to change them. Monroe was the first. It began with small things, words he couldn't quite remember saying. Things he'd never meant to think. At first, it seemed like nothing, just little lapses. But then, he began to look at them differently. It was as if the person standing in front of him wasn't the Monroe he'd known. Stop it, Reyes muttered under his breath. We need to keep it together. But it was already too late. Monroe began muttering to himself words that didn't make sense. At first it was barely audible, a soft hiss of syllables as if his lips were shaped by something other than his own mind. I'm not Monroe anymore, he whispered, his eyes empty. I am the Hollow. Reyes stepped forward. Monroe, snap out of it. You're still you. You can fight this. But Monroe's eyes were vacant, his mind lost to whatever dark force had taken root inside him. Then it happened to Pierce. It came slowly. First it was a vague sensation, a gnawing feeling at the back of his mind. Then, as time dragged on, it became clearer, creeping voice. Quiet at first, but unmistakable in its tone. You're not real, the voice whispered. You're just a part of the dream. Pierce froze, his body trembling. His own hands felt foreign to him, as if they didn't belong to him at all. He looked down and saw only the faintest outline of his reflection in the console glass. But the face that stared back wasn't his. It was something else. Pierce, Reyes asked, his voice filled with concern. You're okay, right? But Pierce didn't respond. His eyes were empty, glazed over, as though the light had gone out of them completely. I'm not Pierce, he said, the voice coming from his mouth, but not his own. I was never Pierce. Reyes backed away, a chill creeping up his spine. He grabbed the rifle, his fingers shaking. No. This can't be happening. But the entity, the thing, had learned their names. It had learned their weaknesses, their fears. And now it was erasing them, one by one, taking their very identities and twisting them, consuming their minds like a parasite. And Reyes could feel it. It was already in him. He could feel it scraping at the edges of his consciousness, tugging at his thoughts. It wasn't a matter of if it would take him, it was a matter of when. He stumbled backward toward the escape pod, but the doors were still locked, the pod still offline. There was no escape. He couldn't even leave the ship anymore. Reyes. Pierce's voice was softer now, but it wasn't his voice. It was the thing's voice, mimicking him. Why are you running? Reyes' mind raced. There had to be something. Some way to stop it. He punched in commands at the console, trying every combination, but the system resisted him, locking him out at every turn. Then he realized something. It wasn't just the ship that was malfunctioning. It was them. The entity had taken root. It had become them. They were no longer in control of their own bodies. They were prisoners in their own flesh. And worse, they were changing. They could feel it this deep. Suffocating pull toward the thing that had taken their minds. Reyes took one last look at Monroe and Pierce, both of them. Their faces hollow, blank stares etched into their expressions. And in that moment, Reyes understood. There was no escape. Not from the ship, not from the entity, and not from themselves. The signal was faint, barely a whisper in the cold, infinite void. But it was enough. A single transmission, barely audible, crackling through the static of deep space. It wasn't much, just a few broken words. A desperate plea from the lost crew of Aletheia. They had thought they were alone. They had thought it was over. But they were wrong. The transmission began shaky, fragmented, as if the very air around it refused to carry it. It was all that remained, the final echo of a crew that had vanished into the darkness. Don't come here. The voice was weak, trembling. A man, perhaps, or someone who once was. It's not dead. It never was. There was a long pause, like a breath held for too long. The crackling static was all that could be heard. The silence between words suffocating. The entity, it's still here, still watching. It doesn't die. The transmission cut out, leaving behind a haunting silence. But that wasn't the end. The message continued to haunt the airwaves. A call for help to anyone who would listen. If you hear this, don't come. It's inside you. It knows everything. A final gasp, and then nothing. The transmission was gone. Only the empty, oppressive silence of space remained. The screen fades to black, but there's a lingering presence. Somewhere, far away, on Earth, someone heard that signal, and now they know the truth. The Aletheia is not lost. It never was. It's waiting. End of transmission.